nowhere's really 100% safe, let's be perfectly honest. So I know Paige has done some videos on like the scariest places she's ever camped or this and that and the other thing. What I actually want to talk with you about today is ways that we tend to stay safe while traveling. You've probably noticed some of our reviews and stuff, we tend to actually stay near city centers a lot. Aside from when we're out in Big Bend and out doing these big adventures, a lot of times if we're just doing overnights or staying a week somewhere, we're probably near a city. And I've heard from some of you,
why are you doing that? That's not safe. You're all crazy.
I'm going to go over some ways that we stay safe, both inside cities, with our RV, while we're out in remote areas, and everywhere in between. We have lived in several large cities. We've lived in Cleveland, we've lived in Dallas. We've also lived in the sticks growing up. I grew up in rural Michigan. Paige grew up in rural Maine. Like, we've lived everywhere in between. I'm of the opinion that everywhere has its own dangers. Everywhere has its own trade-offs that you're going to be dealing with. And so we're going to actually go over some of that today and the things, the preparations that we take to stay safe ourselves. So theft prevention. So it is true that there is more property crime in cities because there is more property in general. So story time. We're in Salt Lake City, actually relatively close to City Center. And as we check in, there's actually, I think it was actually a printed notice. You know, they give you lots of pamphlets and things like that. Some of you might read them, some of you probably don't care. But right down there it says, please lock up your bikes. They actually had a number of bike thefts. Now, I've been a victim of bike theft. College campuses, you know, were rife with it. You know, everybody has a bike and I've had mine stolen. I know lots of people that had multiple bikes stolen on a college campus. So I'm like, oh, of course. We have bike chains, we locked up our bikes and we're perfectly happy. I wake up the next morning and there's this guy yelling at everybody that's around like, hey, did you see who took our bikes? Because they had just left them outside. So step number one to being safe is never be the low-hanging fruit. And if somebody tells you that you should do something to prevent a bad thing from happening, maybe you should do that thing. Keep a really sturdy bike chain with your bikes. Make it harder to get into things. Keep things locked. Generally, property theft happens to easy pickings. It's actually a joke that we have in, especially like the lock sports and lock picking community, is that locks are to keep honest people honest. If somebody walks by and just sees a bike sitting there, maybe it's my bike now. But yeah, just try to be the person that is not the one that's going to be super, like, that's going to be take 5 seconds to rip off. You know, honestly, if somebody's going to take, 5 minutes to cut through the chain that I have that has anti-saw on it, or try to pick the disc detainer lock on it, I guess that's their bike now. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. But in general, a lot of the thefts that I've seen in campgrounds were stuff that was left out, that was an opportunity crime, might have even been your neighbors. You don't know because it was just sitting there. So just don't be the low-hanging fruit on that. If you do actually want to learn more about like locks and being safe and stuff, the bike locks I use are actually what the lock-picking lawyer on YouTube uses to protect his bike, I believe. I'll put a link down in the description of the lock I use into his channel, especially if you want to get more into understanding how locks work and things like that. But in general, yeah, just try to stay aware, try to stay safe. So a lot of times when I'm booking campgrounds, I'll actually look on Street View because I'm curious, where is this campground? Has the city grown up around it? We've actually stayed in quite a few of those. Is it out in the middle of nowhere? Is it, next to a police station? Take a look at where you're going to be staying and see just what's going on in the area. Check Street View. Is there a bunch of trash around? If you're feeling particularly plucky, check a crime map. See what's going on around it, especially if you have to stay near a city. So, we generally just go on vibes. Having lived in some larger cities, tend to get some pretty good spidey sense as to what's going on and kind of how safe an area might be, just kind of how it looks and how it feels. But yeah, just try to understand where you're about to stay and what you're doing. So another thing that we picked up, especially from living in a city, daylight's your friend. Especially crime's opportunity, people feel safer doing it when it's dark. That's just kind of how things go. If you're going to be doing activities, we generally try to do them in the daylight, try to stay home at night, etc., especially if we feel like we're in an area that might not be 100% safe. Nowhere's really 100% safe, let's be perfectly honest. There are some areas where we didn't really want to go out at night just because maybe there was a couple of kind of seedy casinos down the road and we just didn't really feel like dealing with the clientele that were coming there at night. What have you. So yeah, just daylight tends to be your friend. On that same vein, when we have stayed in some more urban areas, like we've done some harvest hosts, which were in some more urban-esque areas, or you're staying in parking lots and stuff, we actually have some battery-operated motion sensing lights, and we'll actually put those kind of in a perimeter around us, not where they're easily visible, but kind of where they will be turned on if somebody walks by, just to deter people, be like, oh, somebody might be in there. Maybe I shouldn't be messing around with it. We talked a little bit about city and crime and all that stuff, but that is not the only danger. When you're out in the middle of nowhere, when you're out in Big Bend, when you're out in Yellowstone and all these other places, there are a different level of danger that you're taking into account. First one's, that happens everywhere, honestly, is the weather. Understand weather patterns. The US especially has certain cycles that it goes through. For instance, I wouldn't go camping in Florida in September and October. Just not something that I'm really comfortable doing because I'm probably going to have to get out pretty quick. If you don't want to be around during hurricanes, don't go down during hurricane season. Just like I probably wouldn't stay around Dallas in the late spring and in the fall because that's tornado season around there. I mean, those are a much bigger deal. You might not want to be in a mountain pass in the middle of December. Just, understand weather patterns, understand how to watch for weather, get weather alerts on your phone or a weather radio, depending on what you would like to do, and just learn about the weather. I mean, you can actually read the sky and understand what's going on, especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere, maybe you don't have service, but you can start to kind of read the sky and understand what's going on. But that is actually probably one of the biggest things I think RVers take for granted is that the weather, unfortunately. Honestly, I have been in more danger in our travels with weather than I have been with crime. The last one I want to go over is how to stay safe when you're out and you're doing your activities and things like that. When we are out, especially if we're hiking in remote areas, we do carry a personal locator beacon with us. So we'll link the one we have down below. I think it's a Garmin that tends to work on satellites and things like that. I think we have the one that you can actually text with. So yeah, that keeps us safe. We actually keep it in the rig while we're traveling as well. We keep it charged up because if we're going through a mountain pass and something happens, we were watching the Hanks and they were on the Canada Trail going up to Alaska and they got to a place where nobody had cell phone service. There was a medical event going on and nobody could get help. So like a personal locator beacon that you can contact emergency services on can help in that kind of situation as well. So just try to be prepared when you're doing that. Other things that we actually carry with us while we're maybe in the Jeep or in here, we generally have emergency toolkits, first aid kits, things like that, things to keep you safe if an emergency does happen because you are traveling. I notice I get a lot more cuts and bruises and a lot more personal minor danger, we'll say, when I'm setting up the rig, when we're moving around, like I'll have, mystery bruises that happen. Like you are more likely to injure yourself or have things happen to you while you're traveling around. We even make sure we keep a small amount of water in the tank, just for emergencies. We have both a water filtration system and we have a life water system that we can pull out if we're really stuck and we need to filter water out. So yeah, just ways to keep yourself safe in emergencies. If you get stuck in a remote area for a couple days because you blew out an axle or something, you want to be able to live. So what have I missed? What ways do you stay safe? What things do you have, maybe you have a different emergency kit, maybe you have a preferred personal locator beacon, or maybe you just want to say hi. Well, get down in the comments below, tell us what you think. And otherwise, have a good rest of your day, the rest of your trip, and we'll see you next week.